Okay, so today we're diving into some pretty weighty stuff. We're going to be
Yeah.
talking about U.S. immigration policy
Mm.
and specifically how it affects folks down in Latin America.
Okay.
So the jumping on point for this deep dive is an article we found from CBS News, and
Uh,
it talks about the Trump administration making the decision to close down a whole bunch of immigration offices in Latin America.
hmm.
And the thing is, these offices were actually like set up by the Biden administration.
Oh, wow.
So you can already see we've got like a bit of a political tug of war going on here.
Yeah.
When you've got two administrations with like completely opposite stances on
All
immigration,
right.
what happens?
It's a recipe for uncertainty, I think,
Mhm.
and that uncertainty really trickles down and affects the everyday lives of, people who are trying to navigate this system.
Yeah, no kidding. And the CBS article, it really lays it out there, like plain and simple. When the Trump administration shuts down these offices,
Hmm.
it doesn't just make things a little bit tougher for people who are hoping to find asylum in the U.S.
Right.
It makes it way, way harder.
Hmm.
We're not just talking about paperwork here. We're talking about people's lives hanging in the balance.
Absolutely. In fact, the article highlights a specific example of a family who'd been waiting for an asylum interview at one of these offices for like 2 years.
Wow.
And now with the closure, their whole future is up in the air. Like
Yeah.
they're in total limbo.
Mhm.
And this highlights how these policy changes, they're not just abstract political moves. They have very real, very human consequences.
Yeah, it's tough to wrap your head around that level of uncertainty.
Yeah.
It makes you think about those times you've had to deal with some kind of bureaucratic nightmare, right?
Oh,
Like trying to renew your driver's license or
mm,
or dealing with some tax issue.
yeah.
And it's a pain, right? But now imagine going through that, but you're in a whole other country. You might not even speak the language. And on top of all that, you're terrified of being sent back to a place that's dangerous.
Exactly. I mean, that's a whole other level of stress and complexity that most of us, thankfully, can't even fathom.
Right. And it's important to note the Biden administration wasn't just trying to speed up the application process or
Oh,
anything.
no, they had a much more kind of holistic strategy in mind with these offices.
Yeah, the article actually mentions that they were trying to address the root causes of migration from Central America, things like poverty and violence.
Right, those huge underlying issues.
So what did that look like in action?
Well, the article gave some examples like setting up partnerships with local NGOs.
Okay.
The idea was to work with these organizations to create economic opportunities in these communities, give people viable alternatives to packing up and making that risky trip north.
Makes sense.
And now, with the potential loss of support for these programs, there's a lot of concern that we could see a surge in migration, with even more people feeling like they have no choice but to leave.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It feels like solving the problem with a Band-Aid,
Yeah,
and it could end up making things worse in the long run.
exactly.
So we've talked about the immediate impact on folks seeking asylum, but what about the bigger picture?
Hmm.
What could the long-term consequences be for the entire region?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If the U.S. isn't actively engaged in addressing those root causes, those push factors that are driving people to migrate in the first place,
Yeah,
it puts a ton of pressure on other countries in the region, right?
right.
You could see increased migration flows to neighboring countries, which might not have the resources to cope with that influx of people. It's a complicated situation with, no easy answers.
Absolutely. So just to kind of like bring it all together for everyone, the Trump administration's decision to close these immigration offices,
Yeah.
it's not just about paperwork and procedures. It's a much bigger deal than that.
Right.
It has the potential to make life a lot harder for people seeking asylum.
For sure.
And it signals a pretty significant shift in the direction of U.S. immigration policy as a whole.
Yeah, and it really begs the question, what happens next? If
Well,
the U.S. isn't stepping up and taking a leading role in trying to address the root causes of this migration in Latin America, what does that mean for other countries? What responsibilities do they have?
mhm.
And what are some potential solutions that they could explore?
Yeah, those are some big questions.
Big questions with no easy answers, for sure.
Definitely something for us all to think about.
Absolutely.
Thanks for breaking this down.
Yeah, no problem. It's a complex issue. Thanks for having me.
It really is.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Catch you next time.
See ya.